Welcome to Crescent City Crime, dear listeners. I'm Tracy.
And I'm Brian.
Thank you to everybody who has been tuning in, listening to us. If you're new here, welcome. And if you are a returning customer, welcome back.
Welcome and thank you for listening.
And guess what, Brian?
What?
We officially have over 1,000 listens on our podcast. So throughout this whole year, our small but apparently dedicated following has helped us out. So thank you, listeners. Thank you very much.
Thank you for getting us to 1,000 listens.
Over 1,000.
Appreciated.
Over 1,000.
Awesome.
Yeah, even better, right?
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm very much looking forward to what this podcast is going to bring to everybody next year, especially.
Me too.
As always, dear listeners, you can follow us on TikTok at TVSmith68. Instagram is CCC NOLA Podcast. And our YouTube is Crescent City Crime. All of our social medias will be linked in the show notes. Make sure that you tell your friends. It's so important to have word of mouth spread by y'all. You know, we appreciate if you would tell anybody about our podcast. Your friends or
your enemies, especially tell your enemies.
Yes. We always appreciate ratings and reviews. And if you're not subscribed to us yet, why the heck aren't you? Because we are everywhere. We are on every podcasting platform.
And it's free.
And it is free. It is free to subscribe. All it costs you to listen to us is a little bit of your time. So, last week, we started talking about Edwin Edwards, and we kind of glossed over some of the crimes that he had committed up to that point. Now, Edwin Edwards' third term was fraught with trouble. In February 1985, soon after his third term started, he stood trial on charges of mail fraud, obstruction of justice, and bribery. And these charges were brought against him by the United States Attorney John Bowles. Does any of these names sound familiar to you?
Yeah, I remember John Bowles.
So the charges were stemmed from a scheme in which Edwards and his associates received almost $2 billion in exchange for granting preferential treatment to companies dealing with state hospitals. So this was contractor nonsense, right? Like a lot of things, white-collar crime.
Yes. Yeah, giving preference for contracts based upon basically graft.
Well, he insisted that he was innocent, of course, and the charges were politically motivated by Bowles and the Republican Party. The first trial resulted in a mistrial in December of 1985, while a second trial in 1986 resulted in an acquittal. So once again, Edwin Edwards escaped the grasp of the law. For now. But during his first trial, Edwin Edwards rode to the Hale Boggs Federal United States Courthouse on a mule from his hotel. When asked by reporters why he did so, he replied something to the effect that it was symbolic of the speed and intellect of the federal judicial system, but also that he supported tradition. I don't understand what he was doing there.
He had a history of making the feds the butt end of jokes.
Yes, he did. He did. His brother, Marion Edwards, who was also an attorney, often wore a pinstripe suit with a top hat and cane and held comedic press briefings at the end of each court session on the steps of the courthouse. He would mock the United States Department of Justice, the United States Attorney Bowles, and the United States Judge Marcel Livaudouas. Sorry, I know I mangled that. But that was the one who was presiding over the trials. A highlight in the aftermath of the acquittal is that the hotel where the jurors had been sequestered claimed that half of them had stolen towels as they left. And upon learning that, Edwards, who was never at a loss for words, said that he had been judged by a jury of his peers. In the wake of the acquittal, his popularity started to plummet. Even though he was found innocent in court, the trial put his life under a microscope, and his personal conduct was under scrutiny. It was found during frequent gambling trips to Las Vegas that Edwards had lost hundreds of thousands of dollars under aliases such as T. Wong and E. Lee. And later he paid off those gambling debts using suitcases stuffed with cash of unknown origin. So there we go. He just doesn't stop.
Yeah, he liked suitcases of cash and envelopes of cash. And
well, I think everybody likes those things.
Brown bags filled with cash. I think his big favorite was the brown bag.
Anybody want to give us a brown bag full of cash? I'll take it. No questions asked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Now, one other thing that he did was that he sought support for the legalization of gambling in the state of Louisiana as a solution to the state's severe revenue shortage. And he made the state made unpopular budget cuts to education and other social programs. So Edwin Edwards was looking at gambling as a way to not have these programs cut and to give the state revenue.
Yeah. And I do remember that well. In fact, during my time with the close-up political studies program in high school with McBain, one of our trips was to the Capitol in Baton Rouge, where we actually stayed a few days while doing this at a hotel. And we had our own mock committee hearing utilizing one of the actual committee rooms from state legislators. And I noted, and I was sitting in one of the committee chairs, and I noticed some, notes and mumblings on paper left behind by some of the legislators.
Uh-huh.
And one of them was a note to another one that said, looks like EWE, Edwin W. Edwards,
right,
will not be able to get to his own casino. And another note said, dress code, EWE wouldn't make it.
So, in other words, they wanted a dress code, but Edwards wouldn't make it?
It was being discussed, and they were joking about the way Edwin Edwards dresses.
Oh, okay.
At the time, they were saying he wouldn't make his own dress code and be kept out of his own casino.
I see. Gotcha. In January 1986, Edwards was still advocating for legalizing gambling. He wanted casinos in 15 locations, and he wanted to create a state lottery, but the state legislature rejected his gambling proposals. Now, during his next bid for governor, he conceded defeat to his opponent, Buddy Roemer, who was the son of Charles Roemer. Nobody realized it at the time, but Edwin Edwards was biding his time and waited for his next chance to run for governor.
It should come right after Desert Storm.
Yes, it did. You're right.
Yeah.
After his 1987 defeat, Lanny Keller, who was a journalist for the Shreveport Journal, wrote that the only way Edwin Edwards could ever be elected again was to run against Adolf Hitler.
Yeah.
It was not that far off.
Nope.
Because the runoff for the 1991 race was between Edwin Edwards and everyone's favorite asshole, David Duke.
Yes. The man who, to this day, celebrates Adolf Hitler's birthday.
Yeah, eventually we will cover David Duke on this podcast, but for those who are unaware, David Duke is a racist trash bag, and he's a former imperial wizard of the Ku Klux Klan.
Overall, he's a bum who's rarely had a real job, and usually would simply make money by sending out racist, hate newsletters, and get racist bigots, anti-Semitic types to literally send him money because they, listening to his hate speech would make them feel good, so they'd send him money.
Right.
And quite frequently, especially during the 90s, it seemed to me like he had a symbiotic relationship with the media. The media would give him attention for, whatever hate speech he was engaging in at the time or trying to run for public office. And then, of course, the bigots would respond to the, quote, liberal media by sending him money, which is why I would say he had a symbiotic relationship with the media. They would kind of help him make money by calling attention to him, and he would help them sell commercials and newspapers.
Oh, you mean much like Fox News today? Gotcha.
Yeah. Kind of like that, yeah. That kind of relationship.
Now, this governor's race was a unique situation between David Duke, the dedicated white supremacist, and Edwin Edwards, who was corrupt, but he was minority friendly. The race gained national attention. Of note is that his former political opponent, David Treen, endorsed Edwin Edwards for office during the race. A couple of popular bumper stickers urged support for Edwards. One read, "Vote for the crook, it's important."
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And another one read, "Vote for the lizard, not the wizard." And Edwin Edwards did win that race by a comfortable margin. After the election, Edwards said of Duke that the only thing we have in common is that we both have wizards beneath the sheets. And he also feigned concern for David Duke's health due to smoke inhalation because he's around so many burning crosses. And when a reporter asked Edwards what he needed to do to triumph over Duke, Edwards replied, "All I have to do is stay alive." During his final term as governor, he was the first Southern governor to issue an executive order protecting lesbian, gay, and bisexual persons from discrimination in state governmental services, employment, and contracts. He promoted casino gambling in Louisiana, and this time he was successful. In June 1992, his lobbying led to the state legislature to pass a bill calling for a single large land-based casino in New Orleans. He also appointed a board that, at his private direction, awarded 15 floating riverboat casinos that had been authorized by the state legislature. That's a lot of gambling all at once in the state of Louisiana.
Oh, yes. Now also, he was able to bring the lottery to Louisiana, too.
Yes, he did that, too.
He got that started before the casinos even opened.
Now, some of the people awarded casino licenses were linked to organized crime.
Yep.
Yes. And this caused a political backlash against gambling-related corruption. And in June of 1994, Edwin Edwards announced that he would be retiring from politics at the end of his term. Now, 3 years later, and this is the part that I remember the best, in 1997, a former congressman named Cleo Fields was captured by an FBI surveillance videotape showing him accepting a large amount of cash from Edwards and stuffing it in his pockets. At the time, Cleo Fields stated that the incident was just an innocent business transaction between friends and said that there was a humorous explanation which he would make public shortly thereafter. And after this, though, Cleo Fields, there was always a cloud over him. He was never indicted as a co-conspirator. And in the end, Fields refused to deliver the promised humorous explanation, stating that at the time of the cash transfer, he was not an elected official and therefore under no obligation to explain publicly.
Yeah, which is a very poor explanation with bad optics involved. Even Jarvis DeBerry, who was
he's a columnist for one of our local media outlets.
Yeah, he was for a long time. He was a columnist for the Times-Picayune, and very, very, very liberal, very much a Democrat. Even he criticized Cleo Fields.
Yes,
wanting an explanation, and he facetiously said in one of his columns, "I would like to think that Edwin Edwards and Cleo Fields were secretly, working on a plan to help the poor."
Right. Yes.
But I doubt it.
All right. We are going to get back to the story after this quick break. In 1998, Edwin Edwards was indicted by the federal government on 26 charges of racketeering, extortion, money laundering, and fraud, and he was found guilty on 17 of those counts. After his conviction, Edwards said, quote, "I did not do anything wrong as a governor. Even if you accept the verdict as it is, it does not indicate that." Which, okay, I guess that's fair.
Well, this happened after he's out of office.
It did happen when he was out of office. That's right. And when he was on his way to prison, he says, "I will be a model prisoner as I have been a model citizen." From 2002 to 2004, Edwin Edwards was incarcerated at the Federal Medical Center in Fort Worth, Texas. And then in 2005, he was moved to the Federal Correctional Institute in Oakdale in Allen Parish. While there, he was the prison librarian, and he helped prisoners get their GEDs. So even in prison, he was trying to be productive and help other people.
Well, yeah, when a lawyer goes to prison, it's always smart to be of service to other inmates so that you can gain respect and be given your space.
Right.
In that capacity. Like, for example, G. Gordon Liddy did something similar when he went to prison.
He was an attorney?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. That just like his father, and the G. Gordon Liddy kept being moved from prison to prison because the prisons were getting tired of him assisting inmates in writing writs.
Oh.
And getting reduced sentences or even getting released.
Why don't you tell the uninitiated briefly who G. Gordon Liddy was?
Well, G. Gordon Liddy is mostly famous for his involvement with the Watergate burglary.
Right.
With the Nixon administration, he unfortunately wound up in the dirty tricks department of Tricky Dick's administration, Richard Nixon. But prior to that, yes, he was a lawyer, a local prosecutor, an FBI agent, an officer in the U.S. Army.
Yeah, he had a big life.
Yeah, he certainly did. And he refused to cooperate in any investigation and went to jail. Served some time in jail, which we touched upon, and every one of all four of his children wound up serving in the armed forces one way or another, including one became a SEAL.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, another one was a Marine serving as a MARSOC raider.
What's a MARSOC raider?
I forget what MARSOC stands for, but it's Marine Corps Special Operational Forces that deploy off ships doing counterterrorism, commando types of stuff.
Oh, okay.
They're similar to SEALs.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. In January of 2011, Edwin Edwards was released from prison and served the remainder of his sentence at a halfway house. And his sentence ended on July the 6th of 2011 and he began 3 years of probation. And in 2013, he was granted early release from probation due to good behavior. So he looks like he was indeed a model citizen during the sentence.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Two of Edwards' former opponents, David C. Treen and J. Bennett Johnson Jr., and United States Senator John Breaux petitioned both George W. Bush and Barack Obama for a pardon on Edwards' behalf, but both of them rejected the petition, so Edwin Edwards was never pardoned.
That would have been a bit much, even asking a Democratic administration.
That would set a bad precedent.
Yeah, big difference between, I believe at one point he wasn't granted clemency.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference between clemency and a pardon. Clemency is when you can get released from prison earlier, but you still have the conviction on your record. So it's not a pardon.
When he was convicted and sent to prison, he was married to Candy Piku, who was about 40 years younger than him. And while in prison, they divorced, which was finalized in 2004. And then on July the 29th of 2011, Edwin Edwards married Trina Grimes Scott, who was his prison pen pal. Isn't that sweet? She is 51 years younger than him, and they held their wedding at the Hotel Monteleone in New Orleans.
Yeah, that's quite an old hotel.
Yes, it is. Edwin and Trina Edwards were the subjects of the short-lived reality show The Governor's Wife, which premiered October the 27th, 2013 on the Arts and Entertainment Network. The program focused on their family life, and it only ran for one season. In the final episode, the couple announced that Trina was pregnant, and she gave birth to a boy named Eli Wallace Edwards on August 1st of 2013. So even late in life, Edwin Edwards managed to have a child.
Yeah, he had a few.
Yeah, he did have a few, but this was his final child. And if Edwin Edwards would have lived 15 years after this, he would have been eligible to run for governor again. But that was not the case, as on July the 12th of 2021, he passed away at the age of 93. And that is more or less a story of the ever-colorful, controversial, and unforgettable Edwin Edwards.
Yeah, my dad lived 2 years longer than Edwin Edwards.
Ah, that's right, he did.
Yeah.
So, Brian, you have any final thoughts on Mr. Edwards? So I got to tell you, I think he's probably my favorite politician in all of history.
It seems that every time political pundits, commentators counted him out, he came back.
That's true. He was very stubborn. Very stubborn.
Yeah, very, 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 very tenacious.
He certainly left his mark on the state of Louisiana.
Yeah, ubiquitous with the state of Louisiana for quite some time.
Yeah. It is a shame that there wasn't some kind of de-aging potion that he could have taken so he could run for governor again, because I am not feeling good about this next governor's race that we're about to have in the state of Louisiana.
Me neither.
But we will get into that more later on as time progresses. Now, dear listeners, because it is the holiday season, we're only going to have 3 episodes this month, but next week's episode will be extra long. So we will be talking about the psychology of true crime aficionados, and I will be talking about a case that does not take place in Louisiana, but one of the cases that when I was younger had a great impact on me and was one of my gateways into true crime.
during this holiday season, keep in mind that the armed robberies go up, vehicle burglaries go up. So try not to leave anything valuable in your car for an extended period of time. And be sure to watch yourself in retail parking lots, especially. Keep in mind, these thugs are not out to take your money because they're looking to buy Christmas presents. No, it's just because they know you have money, you're carrying money to buy Christmas presents, and they're simply looking to get this money for nefarious purposes.
Yeah, and they don't care how hard you work to afford Christmas for your family or for yourself or for your dog or your cat or your plants.
No, they are a bunch of narcissistic sociopaths who
only think about themselves.
Yes.
So, dear listeners, don't be like that. Watch out for yourselves. Watch out for each other. Try to be kind this holiday season, as I feel like a lot of the world has been short on kindness lately.
Yes.
So, dear listeners, until next time, be safe, be kind. Remember that we're all human beings, and don't park next to vans.
If it's dark, it's dangerous, and you don't feel safe, don't be there in the first place, especially during this holiday season, as those are the kinds of places where people are up to no good. And if you are talking to law enforcement in an official capacity and you are not the victim or the witness to a crime, lawyer up.